It's our February show with Bobbi and Brady, MPP, Haldimand, Norfolk. This month, boy, we got to talk about the December 27th incident. I read your piece on judicial reform. I agree with a ton of stuff in there, and there's so much more that we could talk about, but I'm going to give you the stage and talk to me about the situation. I know that you've been taking in incredible emails, telephone calls, all of it on this when it happened. And thank you for being our MPP and dealing with this, man. It's tough.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's definitely media you never want to do again. You can't prepare for that type of thing, and it's a tragedy. It's a heinous act of crime. I went to I'll call it the front line the day after, and Mayor Shelley Bentley and I were there at the same time, and we thanked those police officers who were at the barricades. We thanked them for their service. We paid our respects. And what struck me was how shocked they were by us doing this. And one of them actually, said to me, he said, thank you very much for thanking us, because nobody ever does. And that to me is a shame. There are men and women who every day choose to get up and put on a uniform to keep our community safe, to keep you safe, me safe, our kids safe. And they do it to the best of their abilities. And, I feel like government and media and the rest of us have a responsibility to restore some of that respect that, when we were young, Dave, when you saw a police officer on the street, we were encouraged through our families, through churches, through our schools, that we should go up to that police officer and we should talk to them. And I feel that a lot of that respect has been eroded away, and I think we need to restore it. Greg Porcello was a fine young man who just hours before had learned that his probation period was completed. And that young man must have been on cloud nine. And for the day to end the way it did it just tugs at my heartstrings. And, I think that the community rallied together very quickly. One of the reporters asked me, what does a tragedy like this do to small town? And I said, well, here in Haldimand, Norfolk, what it does is it brings us together. And the first few days, after the tragedy, of course, there was so much sadness. I mean, I think Ontario was flooded with sadness. But quickly in our community, the sadness was also coupled with anger as to how this could have happened. As information unfolded, the community started asking questions, and they realized that this was an absolute senseless situation. And so that leads into why I wrote the piece I did on judicial reform, and why the constituents of Haldimand, Norfolk, and the police and everyone else out there, I am committing to continuing my fight to see this change. We can't just stand up and say it's needed and not make the moves to actually ensure that the proper change is made.
You talk a little bit in this piece about bail reform and catch and release. Can you explain that a bit to the audience?
Yeah. So, I have a lot of policing friends, and I know that they are tired of, on a Monday going and picking up a guy or gal, and then they go through the system. And by Tuesday, that same police officer or the same force attachment is out there picking up the same guy or gal. And, it's like a dog chasing its tail. These police officers do all the hard work of tracking these people down, loading them up, taking them to the courthouse, and they're just released. There's a lot of things going on. Bail hearings. sureties, for example, I think that COVID exacerbated this, but I think the court system is trying to go to a more efficient style or model. And so you have sureties who may be appearing by Zoom. And I don't know about you, Dave, but if you're acting as a surety for someone and I'm the JP, I want you sitting in front of me. I want to see how maybe you interacted with, the police officer at the door. I want to see your body language as you sit in front of me. I want to know whether or not I should really be sending this person home under your responsibility. And, in the case of Randall McKenzie, I question who was the surety. Did that surety know that Mr. McKenzie, was going off the rails in this way? And if they did they contact anyone? What has happened to that surety? What responsibility does that surety now have now that this terrible crime has occurred?
Wow, and that, like you said, the system within itself has to change. So, I know I'm no expert at it, and I know that you're learning quickly on the fly. Mm-hmm. Is there? I mean, nothing is a simple solution. I get that, but is there something to draw out this process? So, like you said, when someone's re-released on the street within 24 hours, and they're going to commit, or they're, maybe they're struggling with abuses of some sort, or like. Is our system so overthought there's not enough spots to put these folks? Like, is that what it boils down to, do you think?
I think so. And I've been traveling with the finance committee. I sit on the government's finance committee. And a few weeks ago, we were in Kenora. We were in the Great White North. And it's very, very depressed there. They have a lot of drug use and they have a lot of crime. In fact, I was walking with one of my colleagues, MPP Stephanie Bowman, and we were out by the lake and we saw police officers and firefighters chasing someone across the lake, a bad guy across the lake. And so a gentleman pulled up, Rick pulls up, and he's a town guy, and he right away says, "Hey, you two aren't from town." He knew, right?
Yeah.
And I said no, and I handed him a business card, and he asked what we were doing there. But he says, "Okay, Bobbi Ann," he's like, looks at his watch, and he says, 20 minutes until it turns dark. He says, "You need to walk right back to your hotel because it's not safe."
That's just what it's come to, hasn't it? Like, right.
And I guess, I can't remember what the original question was now, Dave. I was getting there. But...
That's okay. That's okay. We were just sort of elaborating on, we were talking about, how the system has sort of failed. And you were pointing out how when you went north, it's the same thing, that we're seeing this breakdown in the community.
That's right.
With drugs and alcohol and, where it leads.
Yeah. And so the police in Kenora, or some mayors from Dryden and surrounding areas appeared before the committee, and they talked about the idea that people no longer call the police because they think there's no use in calling the police because they see these same people back out on the street after they've been caught, right? That gives the police a bad name. It's not the police.
It's the system.
It's our justice system. And, and I know, now I came back. So the mental health aspect, in Kenora, they were talking about, I asked a question actually of one of the presenters who was looking for a safe injection site. And that's another conversation of my thoughts on safe injection sites. But I asked her, I said, do you believe that many of these problems could be solved if the government would make good on its commitment to getting people the proper mental health treatment that they need and deserve? And she said, yes. And that treatment's not there. We know that here locally, right? Yeah, you can have a Zoom appointment with a psychiatrist in Brantford, maybe.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that leads me to my next area where I wanted to sort of push this was, it's estimated across this country, the government, federally and provincially, will collect $50 billion in alcohol tax. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I'm just throwing this out to you. That, in my opinion, is that money needs to be put back into drug and alcohol addictions, mental health issues.
Yep.
I mean, we got to start looking at this long term because it's not going to go away. We need a 25-year plan, 50-year plan, right? In my opinion. Now, when you see that and you go north and you can't go out after dark, the other half of this question is, you brought up a good point when you said you grew up. And when I grew up in Port Dover, you knew who the police officers were every day, and they knew your parents. So you damn well better fall in line.
That's right.
So, I mean, is that maybe another way we need to go? Do we need more local forces that you can relate to? I'm just guessing. I'm just shooting off on this one. I don't know. But what's your thoughts?
Well, I do think that the larger model, over the years as we have progressed, I guess, as a society, we've discovered, and we see it in the school board system, we see it in the healthcare industry, and we also see it in policing, is that a lot of that local decision making is taken away. And you're right. I mean, when we had regional police in town, if you got in trouble in town, your parents knew before you got home because, Constable so-and-so knew your dad and called him.
Exactly.
And, that, I don't know, I think that there is something to be said for those officers that are from the community, who know the community, and the community knows them. And I know there's problems that are, that used to arise from that relationship as well. I get that. But talking about the tax revenue, I mean, government is addicted to all sorts of sin taxes, and there's always going to be people who, as long as the product is legal, who are going to drink and smoke, and that's their right. I mean, hey, I'm not going to lie. I love my odd glass of red wine. So, but yeah, sure, I think you're right that some of those taxes have to be spent, or the majority of those taxes have to be spent a little more wisely. We need to invest back into those in our communities who are vulnerable. I was speaking to a police officer last week, and he made it very clear to me that the majority of young people that police pick up who are in trouble have never played an organized sport, have never been involved in their community. And, people have always said to me, oh, you spend a lot of time running your kids around, this, that, and the other. Yep, that's my job. And I pray to God every single day that by doing that, they will stay on the straight and narrow. And, I was driving along the other day and I was thinking about this, like, how do we ensure that little boy or girl who, wants to dance, wants to play ball, wants to play hockey, we need to find a way for them to do that, to afford to do that. And I know there's all sorts of wonderful programs out there like Jumpstart. There need to be more. And then the other side of that is, how do we get them there, right? Mom and dad, separate pages, one has addictions issues, one's not in the picture anymore. How does little Johnny or Susie, if we do afford to, sign them up for that sport, how do we then get them there? And that's a problem, I think, that we have to try and find a solution to within our local communities. But it makes me sad because I'm sure there are so many, pro baseball players, pro hockey players, Team Canada female hockey players, you name it, world-renowned dancers out there who will never be, just because of where or who they came from. And that's a tragedy in itself.
One of the areas too on that I think would help a lot. And I'm not putting this on schools or teachers, but opening those gyms, opening up all those gyms and letting volunteers teach basketball. Mm-hmm. What do you need? A pair of shoes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think Waterford has a great program, but I mean, this is kind of where we need to get back to a little bit and get our kids out there socializing and seeing that there's other things to do. The other side of the coin on that too, and I totally agree with you that 100%, we need to find ways to get that happen. But let's take it one step further. Let's look at maybe that kid that comes from the alcohol-induced parents that has FASD. There isn't a chance in the world. And again, you've got $50 billion that you're collecting, alcohol has caused this problem.
Yeah.
Let's start addressing these issues too, because that child doesn't even know what sports is.
No.
That child doesn't know when to eat his lunch. There's neurological damage that is done for life. As a community, we've got to be responsible and help that child. Now, the person that caused that problem, that's not the child's fault. And I think we forget that sometimes. I think we get lost in that. And
I think that society looks at that child as doomed from conception.
Right.
And
they do. And it will be doomed from conception if they don't do anything. That's my argument with that is like, okay, then we know this. Let's make this the best possible scenario we can.
Right.
To protect that child down the road, because I bet you if you and I looked at the system and said, as soon as, when you turn 18, a lot of these programs end, right? That help kids. They're left to their own devices. I wonder what the rate is that ends up in a situation where they're going to do time or they're going to be, have a criminal record. Like you said, we've got to provide for that.
We do.
Man, we could go down this hole, couldn't we, for hours?
We could. And there was a situation that I heard about a while ago whereby an organization had, had these kids up until a certain age in their organization. And then all of a sudden they had aged out, and there was an opportunity to provide programming for these older kids. I'll still call them kids because they are.
They really are.
And they decided that, oh no, we can't do it because of A, B, and C. So you've used those kids, you've retained those kids to keep the money flowing from the time they were 6 until maybe they were 18, 19. And now you just cast them aside. They want to be there. They want to be in that organization. And you're finding every reason to say no to these kids. That is wrong. We have to exercise common sense. Getting back to opening up the gyms, we got to exercise common sense, and we got to reduce the red tape. To open a gym up now,
I know it's crazy, isn't it?
It's like you're going through, the mint.
Insurance.
That shouldn't be. Yeah. Society isn't getting better because we've put all these rules in place to protect people. We're not protecting people. We're making their lives worse with all of the red tape.
Plus, and now we've got to give a shout out to all the positives because we have so many coaches that volunteer and they do great things, but it's become so dang hard to even do that, to volunteer. I mean, I get it. I want a police check done for everybody that's helped playing with, interacting with children. I want that done right off the bat, but give them the opportunity. If they've got a skill they can help and they pass the police check with flying colors, let's get them involved in our community. We need more members to excel at that, to get back to the basics, to, coaching and just you probably, like me, some of the best mentors you had in your life were coaches who said, you can do this, right?
Paul Davidson.
See, was it just comes out, right?
Teacher in grade 7. He taught me how to, throw a jump shot. And he would, back then, my parents both worked late hours. If it wasn't for Paul Davidson, I wouldn't have been able to play sports after school because my parents' time was reserved for taking me to the arena after supper, after they were done work. And Paul would get me to the games. He'd stop and get me a donut and a chocolate milk on the way home. He was my friend. He was like my second dad. Yeah. And today that would be frowned upon. Yeah. Right? Yep. He would never be able to have me alone in his vehicle today. He'd never be able to stop and buy me a donut or a drink. But that man gave me the confidence to go try out for high school basketball, played senior ball in my junior year. He gave me the confidence to do all sorts of things that I never knew I could even try. And
it just takes a minute, doesn't it?
It does. And he knew I appreciated him. And, he was really one of my very best friends. I know that sounds weird because he was, like a father figure to me, but he did so much for me. And it all started with not grade 7. It started with basketball. And, I have had wonderful coaches along the way in hockey as well. And I will say that in my older days, this sounds hokey too, but a bunch of the men that run the martial arts club that I belong to, have given me confidence to do things. Sensei Mike Hill, for example, when he told me that I could go to the World Kickboxing Champions, I thought he, was insane. But he said I could do it, and I believed it. And, I got my butt kicked by a German at the Worlds, but man, I can still say that I went to the Worlds, right?
Yeah.
And it just takes a minute, and it doesn't matter what age you are. We all want someone to believe in us, and it always feels good no matter how old we are. But, getting those kids when they're young and making them feel that they are valued, that they are important, and that somebody loves them is what we need to do. And I coached girls hockey for years, and
what happened.
Yeah. And I remember, situations where like a girl would get there. I remember one time, one little girl got there and she had been shopping that day, and she had her bag of stuff that she had purchased in her hockey bag to show me. But she was the only kid in the room. I couldn't go in, right? So I'm like, hey, honey, you got to bring that out here. And I get that. I get why we have to do that. But I feel like we've gone too far with some of that stuff. And, a teacher can no longer give that 5 or 6 year old in JK or SK who, hasn't had a hug in a long time. That teacher can no longer give that child a hug. And you know what? That may be all that child needs that week.
Just somebody, like you said, somebody to believe in them.
Yeah.
Years ago when my wife and I ran camps, and then this will be a real quick story, but one of the things that we learned really quickly was we had a lot of kids that would come from different backgrounds, CAS and, other things like that. And there's a few stories that stuck with me. And I remember we had kayaks in the lake, and we would push them around with the kids on them. And I remember this little girl on the kayak, and she had come from a situation, obviously, and she turned to me, like, it's this unbelievable, beautiful, sunny day. Like, it was the perfect day to be a kid. Water's like glass. Mm-hmm. And I'm just pushing the boat. She turns to me and she just looks me in the eyes and says, my daddy beats up my mommy. And that, I'm like, no, I don't want you to have that thought today. I want you, this is your day. This is not their day. This is your day, your life. And the other one was, that came to us, it was a girl. All we were told was, if you see a red truck, hold on to her hand, keep her safe. And she saw a red truck. And so she was just glued to me for the whole day, because I don't know the story. That's not my place to say. My job was to make sure that she had a great day, an opportunity. Yep. The last one I'll leave you with, and it gets back to this, it's mentoring. Little guy had to go visit his mom. He was in CAS care years ago, and he was crying. He did not want to leave camp. He was just having a time of his life. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. You'll be back tomorrow. Don't worry. You get to see your mom, blah, blah, blah. And 2 hours later, he was back at camp. And I said, okay, what happened? He wasn't supposed to come back today. And mom was too stoned to see her own son. But we were able to give that kid a good day. You know what I mean? Like, and I think when you and I talk about just a minute, that's what I mean by that. I don't know, I will see kids on the street that came to our camp 20 years ago, and they'll still talk to me, because you got to make that impression, and you got to make sure that they understand like you said, as simple as holding that child's hand to make them feel safe. That's the importance of being a good person, a mentor, to help them get through those tough days. And on this last note too, when you said that about your sensei and growing up, I often refer to this, and I'll tell people this. John Race, John Hasty, two legendary Norfolk guys, were my mentors. And sitting and just listening, not talking, listening, critical. Like, I learned so much from those two men, right? On how to be in a good community, how to act in a community. And I think we got to remember those things. It's critical. Like, you can't let go of those things, because they're the ties that bind.
And I think we are blessed. I think, it's much worse maybe in the cities, but I think we are blessed here. And I think I say this maybe in every podcast, but I truly believe it. I went to a soil and crop meeting last night at the German Hall in Delhi, and it took me 10, 15 minutes to get a parking spot. There were nearly 200 people at this meeting, and they talked about the importance of giving back to their community. Yeah. These are farmers who are saying, to the younger generation, look, you got to have each other's back. You got to volunteer. And everywhere I go, I could be at 20 different events on a weekend. I can't be to all of them. I try hard. But the thing of it is we have good people in our communities who are trying very, very hard to do the right thing. We are blessed. What about those places where you don't know who your neighbor is? You don't know which kids need help or need a hug. Those are the places where we have to invest. I don't know. It's a different world, but there's a lot of good things going on
There
too.
is. Well, I was going to say, I was looking through and I was seeing where you've been in the last little bit. And one of the ones I stopped and I looked at longingly was you reading to the children at St. Joe's. And I thought,
loved it.
She doesn't care who's voting for her. She's there because that's our future.
Yeah.
Right? That was it. There was nothing, and I'm sure you get that from people. It's like, oh yeah, she wants our vote next time. But there you are sitting with kids. And I'm like, that, to me, that says it. That tells me that you're on the right track. So keep doing those things.
They are our future. And man, that crowd. So I've been to a number of schools.
Is that a tough read?
Well, so I got to choose the book. Okay. So talk about, maybe like not being up to date with the world, but I took Super Fudge. Okay. And I start reading it and these kids think it's a riot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe they think it's too much of a riot, because it was at the point where they were talking about how the baby was made. And I'm like, oh boy, maybe I picked a bad book. Right. But these kids thought it was a riot. And when I go into the schools, we can point out the bad things that are going on in our education system. But let me tell you, we also have fantastic educators in this area. When I go into our local schools, those kids are so well prepared. They've done their research. They have their questions written down. Some of them ask me tougher questions than I get in meetings. And I love it because it means that they're engaged, they're thinking, and they are our future leaders. If we don't give them the time, if we don't give them the credit, we're going to be in bad shape. But when I go into our schools and I see some of these kids and I see these educators, trying so hard with these kids, it gives me hope for the future.
And they're honest. The questions are honest. There's no ulterior motive behind it, is it? They're just like, bang, hey, we want to know this about you right now.
Yeah, that's a bit scary sometimes, but I was brutally honest with a few of them at St. Joe's because they came up to me, a few of them, and they wanted my autograph.
Oh, wow. There you go.
No, it was, one of them says, I'm going to give this to my mom or dad for Christmas, so it's a really bad gift. I'm like, I don't think they're going to want my autograph. But
well, when it's
so cute, and I love those visits, and I say, you know what, those may not be my voters, but bring on the school visits because I just love going into them.
After all you'd been through, since that time, since December 27th, was that a relief day? Was that kind of just a fun day to say, hey, how mmany kids did you want to hug? And they had to say no.
Yeah, it is. And, they're feel good things, right? Yep. But most things that I go to in the riding are feel good things. And we have an incredible community and we're very, very lucky.
Why don't you back down from the tough questions? Like, I've seen you and I've thought, she doesn't have to answer that. And you still do it. Like, is that just who you are? Like, this is just a personal question. It's the last one. I'll let you go. Yeah. But yet, what drives that? Because you don't have to. You know what I mean? Like,
I've been well trained over the years, 23 years of working in party politics. I've been well trained on how to use messaging. And I can be honest with you that I've never liked messaging. I've always found, and I think that's where I created relationships with constituents in my career working for Toby, is that I didn't use the messaging. I had a conversation with them and I was honest with them. At the end of the day, people want you to be honest with them. They want to know the truth. And if they don't want to know the truth, then, there's nothing you can do to help those folks. But people say to me, I love how genuine you are. I know how, I love how honest you are. And so there's no need for me to back down from the tough questions, because I'm just, am I always going to answer them 100%? Am I always going to have everyone agree with me in how I answer? But the one thing that I will say to those people is that I'm telling you what I genuinely believe, what I genuinely see and feel, and what I feel is the truth. And I'm not going to stop doing that. And if that means that someday that my political career comes to an end because I've told the truth, because I've been genuine, then that's the way it is.
That's the way it goes. Going back to Queen's Park, this is high on your list. I know this is obviously with judicial reform. How are you going to attack this? Can you give us some insight?
So I'm working on that. I've sent out a bunch of letters by email, reaching out to certain people whom I'd love to sit down with, or at least do a virtual meeting with, and talk about some of the solutions. I'm waiting. It's not always a quick process. I will be speaking to the Solicitor General. I asked the Solicitor General, I think a very tough question on guns at the end of November. I'm not afraid to continue asking those questions. And I will say again, if I was a member of a party, I would not be able to ask those questions. I know what the vetting process looks like when it comes to questions. And I'm in such a great position. Haldimand Norfolk has put us in such a great position to ask those tough questions of the policymakers. And so, I guess I'm putting Michael Kersner on notice right here, is that I will continue to ask tough questions. I don't want Doug Ford's words to be from, the funeral of Constable Purcell. I don't want them to be empty words. I want to see action. I want to make sure that those folks who go out in the community to uphold the system are not continually failed by that very system. And sitting around the kitchen table over the holidays, I have some teenage boys who frequent my house because of my son, and they're sitting there, and I'm looking at them, Dave, and I'm thinking, wow, these guys they're strapping young men who are athletes. They're in good shape. They would make fine police officers. How do I say to them? How do I say to them, hey, guys, you guys would make good police officers, when what we just witnessed was a situation where the system failed that officer? We got to do better. And I will make sure that I do everything I can to ensure we do better.
I'm sure there's going to be another judicial reform report. Do you hope to get on some kind of committee?
I would love to be on some sort of committee.
I think you need to. Yeah, I'd
stick my hand up the tallest if they were looking for folks.
Just jump and scream, make a scene. They'll have to put you on
it. they might expect it.
That's a good point. This was a tough subject today, and I'm glad we talked about it, because we got into a lot of areas, and I know that's not easy for you either. But I thank you. Thanks for taking the time to talk about this. And I hope that this can educate the public. I mean, there's a lot of things that we talked about in there, but folks need to know, we need to educate, and we need to inform. So thanks for doing this today.
Before we go, Dave, can I give a plug for my farm meetings that I'm having in February? So since the beginning of January, it's always the winter farm circuit. I'm used to it from my days with Toby. It's great because the farmers they're just wonderful people to be hanging out with every night. And but you also learn what issues are challenging them, and mental health and stress is plaguing our farmers. And I know there's a lot of people in our community who don't understand the ways of life of a farmer. Things are stressful, high input costs, fertilizer costs, policies just in general, red tape create a lot of frustration and stress on farmers. So let's be cognizant of that when we make comments in the community. Anyway, it also gives me an opportunity to take back what I learned from our farmers in my work on the finance committee. I'm just so much more informed attending these meetings. So that being said, I am hosting my own set of meetings February 15th, both in Delhi and in Kohler. So there's 2 farm meetings happening that day, and I invite every single farmer out there who is interested in coming and telling me what issues are facing them. I invite them to those meetings. They can always call my office to get more information, or email the office. All the information is on my website. But I invite everyone who wants to be there to come out to those meetings, because we will be putting forward a report to Agriculture Minister Lisa Thompson after those meetings conclude.
And on that note, a number of months ago, probably 5 or 6, I did a podcast with CMHA about farmers, and they have a program now in place. So that's somewhere else that they can go. Another resource that I hope helps, because, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Definitely need it. And are those meetings, there's 2 that same day?
2 the same day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. I jam as much into a day as I possibly can.
Yes, you do. All right. Thanks for that update. Take care. We'll talk next month, okay?
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Dave.